when Lyra's beta fiancé publicly humiliated her for being too soft for a warrior's mate. She thought her life was over, until the legendary Alpha King arrived at her pack's doorstep the very next morning, declaring his intention to court the failed bride everyone else had rejected. But why would the most powerful shifter in the realm want an Omega the entire pack considered unworthy of even a beta's attention? Lyra's hands shook as she dropped the heavy water bucket, cold liquid splashing across her bare feet like tiny slaps of reality. Through the kitchen window, she could see him, Beta Marcus, laughing with his warrior friends near the training grounds, his perfect muscles gleaming in the morning sun. In exactly 3 hours, their mating ceremony would begin, and her stomach felt like a nest of angry wasps. "Stop staring and finish your chores," snapped her cousin Elena, shoving past with an armload of wedding flowers. "Some of us actually work around here." The Moonrise Pack's kitchen buzzed with activity as dozens of wolves prepared for the biggest celebration in months. Lyra tried to focus on peeling potatoes, but her wolf kept whimpering inside her chest, sensing something terrible coming. She'd felt this way for weeks, like walking on ice that was about to crack. "Did you hear what Beta Marcus told Alpha Johnson last night?" whispered one of the younger Omegas, her voice barely audible over the chopping and stirring. Lyra's knife froze halfway through a carrot. "What?" he said. The girl glanced around nervously. "He said he wasn't sure you were strong enough to give him proper heirs, that maybe the moon goddess made a mistake." The carrot fell from Lyra's numb fingers. Her wolf howled silently, a sound of pure pain that no one else could hear. She'd always been softer than other she-wolves, rounder where they were lean, gentle where they were fierce. But she'd thought Marcus understood that. She'd thought he loved her anyway. Thunder rumbled overhead, matching the storm building in her chest. The autumn sky had turned the color of old bruises, heavy clouds pressing down like judgment. Rain began pattering against the windows, each drop echoing the rhythm of her racing heart. "Lyra!" Her mother's sharp voice cut through the kitchen noise. "Come help with your dress. We can't have you looking sloppy for your own mating ceremony." The dress hung in her small bedroom like a white ghost, beautiful and terrifying. As her mother tugged and pulled at the fabric, trying to make it fit better around Lyra's curves, more whispers drifted through the thin walls. "I heard Beta Marcus's mother wanted him to choose someone else," said a voice Lyra recognized as Mrs. Patterson from next door. "Really? Who?" asked another woman. "That skinny alpha's daughter from the northern pack. You know, the one who can outrun most of the males." Lyra's mother yanked the dress tighter, making her gasp. "Don't listen to gossip," she hissed. "Marcus chose you. The contracts are signed. Everything will be fine." But Lyra's enhanced hearing caught something her mother missed, footsteps stopping outside their door, followed by urgent whispering. Her wolf's ears pricked up, recognizing Marcus's scent mixed with anxiety, and something that smelled suspiciously like guilt. "I can't do this," came his muffled voice. "Look at her. Then look at me. What will the other packs think?" "The contracts," began another male voice. "Forget the contracts. I'm a beta. I need a mate who can keep up, not someone who gets tired walking to the mailbox." The words hit Lyra like physical blows. She stumbled backward, her mother's hand still fussing with the dress, completely unaware that their world was crumbling just outside the door. "Marcus?" Lyra called out, her voice barely a whisper. The footsteps moved away quickly, leaving only the sound of rain growing heavier against the roof. Her mother continued adjusting the dress, chattering about flowers and food, but Lyra couldn't hear anything except her own heart breaking into a million pieces. An hour later, she stood in the pack's ceremony clearing, white dress clinging to her curves like accusations. 50 wolves had gathered to witness her mating, their eyes tracking her every move. She could smell their excitement, their curiosity, and underneath it all, their pity. Marcus stood at the altar, made of ancient oak logs, handsome as always in his ceremonial robes. But when their eyes met, she saw the truth written across his face, like words carved in stone. He looked trapped, desperate, like a wolf caught in a snare. Alpha Nightshade began the traditional words, his deep voice carrying across the clearing despite the rain. We gather today to witness the joining of two souls, the binding of two hearts. But Marcus wasn't looking at her heart. His eyes kept darting to the crowd, to his warrior friends, to anywhere except her face. When the Alpha asked if he took Lyra as his mate, the pause stretched so long that even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Marcus started, then stopped. The silence grew thick as honey, trapping everyone in its sticky web. Lyra felt her cheeks burning, her wolf whimpering like a kicked puppy. She knew what was coming before he opened his mouth again. What she didn't know was that a pair of golden eyes was watching from the forest edge, and those eyes saw everything, including her worth. I can't. Marcus's words exploded across the ceremony, clearing like thunder, making several wolves jump backward in shock. Lyra felt the world tilt sideways, colors bleeding together like watercolors in rain. The white dress that had felt so heavy now seemed to weigh nothing at all, as if she might float away like a ghost. Around her, 50 pairs of eyes stared, with the hungry curiosity of wolves watching a wounded deer. What do you mean, you can't? Alpha Nightshade's voice carried a dangerous edge that made smaller wolves automatically lower their heads. Marcus straightened his shoulders, but his hands shook as he spoke. I mean, I won't take a mate who can't keep up with a beta's duties. Look at her. He gestured toward Lyra, like she was a disappointing hunting trophy. She's too soft, too slow, too. He paused, searching for the word that would hurt most. Too much. The words hit harder than claws. Lyra's wolf didn't whimper. This time it howled, a sound of pure agony that only she could hear. Her mother gasped somewhere behind her, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. The contracts Alpha Nightshade began were signed before I understood what kind of mate I actually need. Marcus interrupted, his confidence growing with each cruel word. A beta needs a partner, not a burden. I need someone who can hunt beside me, not someone who gets winded chasing butterflies. Cruel laughter rippled through some of the younger wolves. Elena smirked openly, while Marcus's warrior friends nodded like he was making perfect sense. Only the older wolves looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. Lyra opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, to say something that might save whatever dignity she had left. But what came out instead was a small, broken sound that made her hate herself even more. Then what do you suggest? Alpha Nightshade asked coldly. I reject this mating, Marcus declared, his voice ringing across the clearing with awful finality. Let her find someone more suitable to her abilities. The formal rejection hit the gathering like a physical blow. Several Omegas gasped, while the Alphas exchanged meaningful looks that made Lyra's stomach twist with fresh humiliation. Being rejected at the altar wasn't just personal embarrassment. It was pack shame that would follow her family for generations. Lyra finally found her voice, though it came out small and shaky. You're making a mistake. Am I? Marcus looked her up and down with deliberate cruelty. Prove it. Shift. Show everyone how fast you can run. It was a trap, and they both knew it. Lyra's wolf was built for endurance, not speed. She was strong in different ways, better at tracking, at healing, at understanding the emotional needs of the pack. But none of that mattered when you were being humiliated in front of everyone you'd ever known. I don't need to prove anything to you, she whispered, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. That's what I thought, Marcus said with satisfaction. Alpha Nightshade, I formally withdraw my claim. Let someone else deal with this. The way he said this made it clear he wasn't talking about the situation. He was talking about her, like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. Alpha Nightshade looked older than his 60 years as he surveyed the wreckage of what should have been a celebration. The rejection is noted. Everyone may wait. The single word cut through the ceremony like a silver blade, spoken in a voice that carried absolute authority. Every wolf in the clearing froze, heads turning toward the forest edge where a figure stepped from between the massive pine trees. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The man walking toward them moved like liquid power, each step deliberate and graceful despite his enormous size. He wore simple traveling clothes, but there was no mistaking the aura of command that surrounded him like invisible fire. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and his golden eyes swept across the gathering with the calm assessment of a born ruler. "Your Majesty?" Alpha Nightshade breathed, dropping to one knee so fast he nearly toppled over. The entire clearing erupted into chaos as 50 wolves realized they were in the presence of the Alpha King himself. Bodies hit the ground in submission, heads bowed, voices raised in hurried greetings and apologies for their informal appearance. But the king's eyes never left Lyra's face. "Rise," he commanded, his voice carrying easily despite its conversational tone. The assembled wolves scrambled to their feet but kept their gazes respectfully lowered. King Darius Silvercrest stopped 3 feet from the ruined altar, close enough that Lyra could smell his scent pine forests after storms, wild honey, and something indefinably safe that made her wolf stop its pained whimpering for the first time in hours. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said, gold eyes still locked on hers. "A rejection, was it?" Marcus stepped forward, puffing out his chest like he was still the most important person in the clearing. "Your Majesty, I was just explaining that some matches aren't meant to be. This Omega isn't suitable for a warrior's mate." The king's gaze shifted to Marcus, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I see. And what makes you such an expert on suitable mates, Beta?" "Well, Marcus faltered under that golden stare. "A Beta needs a strong partner. Someone who can contribute to the pack's strength." "Strength," the king repeated thoughtfully. "An interesting concept. Tell me, Beta Marcus, what do you know about true strength?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's confidence began to crumble under the weight of royal attention. That is, physical strength, of course. Speed, agility, hunting prowess. "Ah." The king nodded, as if Marcus had just confirmed something disappointing. "So you believe strength is only measured in how fast you can run, or how hard you can bite, isn't it?" Marcus asked, confusion replacing his earlier arrogance. The king smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "No, Beta, it isn't." He turned back to Lyra, who stood frozen in her ruined wedding dress, feeling like she'd stumbled into a dream where nothing made sense. The most powerful wolf in the continent was defending her honor, while her intended mate looked like he wanted to disappear into the forest floor. "What's your name?" the king asked gently. "Lyra," she managed, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Lyra Nightshade, Your Majesty." "Lyra," he repeated like he was tasting the syllables. "A beautiful name for a beautiful woman." The words sent shockwaves through the gathering. Beautiful? Her? The Omega who was too fat, too slow, too much? But when she looked into his golden eyes, she saw something she'd never seen in Marcus's gaze, genuine admiration. Warm and real and completely focused on her. Why would the Alpha King call her beautiful when her own intended mate had just declared her unsuitable? The morning air exploded with the sound of hoofbeats as 50 royal guards thundered into the Moonrise Pack territory. Lyra dropped her breakfast bowl, porridge splattering across the kitchen floor as she rushed to the window. Gold banners snapped in the wind, each one bearing the silver wolf crest that every child knew by heart, the mark of the Alpha King himself. "He's back," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Alpha Nightshade burst through the front door, his face white as winter snow. "Everyone to the main hall, now." His voice cracked like a whip. "The king demands an audience with the entire pack." Lyra's mother grabbed her arm, fingers digging deep enough to leave marks. "Change your dress. Braid your hair. If he's here about yesterday's mess with Marcus, we need to look our best." But as Lyra hurried up the stairs, her wolf stirred restlessly inside her chest. Something felt different about this visit. Something that made her skin tingle with electricity she couldn't name. The great hall filled with nervous chatter as 300 pack members crowded together like sheep sensing a storm. Beta Marcus stood near the front, his chest puffed out like a rooster trying to look important. His friends clustered around him, all sharp smiles and knowing looks. "Probably here to discuss trade agreements," Marcus announced loudly. "Or maybe he needs our warriors for the border disputes down south." Elder Thompson nodded wisely. Kings don't travel with full ceremony unless it's serious business. Could be war coming. But when the massive oak doors swung open, King Darius entered alone. No guards, no advisors, no ceremonial weapons, just the most powerful shifter in the kingdom, walking into their hall like he belonged there. His dark eyes swept the crowd, and Lyra felt her breath catch when his gaze found hers across the sea of faces. For just a moment, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that might have been a smile. "Alpha Nightshade." The king's voice filled every corner of the hall without shouting. "I come before your pack to invoke an ancient law that hasn't been used in over 50 years. The silence that followed was so complete that Lyra could hear her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. "I claim the right of second choosing." Gasps echoed through the crowd like falling dominoes. Elder Thompson's walking stick clattered to the floor. Alpha Nightshade's face went from white to gray. "Your Majesty." Marcus stepped forward, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm not sure what." "The right of second choosing," King Darius repeated, never taking his eyes off Lyra, "allows any unmated alpha to court an omega whose engagement has been dissolved through public rejection. The choice, however, belongs entirely to the omega in question." The words hit the hall like a lightning strike. Every head turned toward Lyra, 300 pairs of eyes boring into her like she was some strange creature they'd never seen before. "Me!" The word squeaked out of her throat before she could stop it. "You, Lyra Nightshade." The king stepped closer, and she caught his scent pine trees after rain, wood smoke, and something wild that made her wolf practically purr. "If you'll have me." Marcus sputtered like a broken engine. "She's still my intended." The contract became void the moment you rejected her publicly. King Darius's voice turned cold as winter steel. "3 witnesses heard you call her too soft and too slow for a beta's mate. Elder Thompson, was this not accurate?" The old man nodded reluctantly, his face flushed with shame. "Then the choice is hers alone." The king held out his hand toward Lyra, palm up like an offering. "I ask for 7 days to prove my worth as a potential mate. 7 days to show you what it means to be cherished rather than tolerated." Lyra's world tilted sideways. Around her, the pack buzzed with shocked whispers. Her mother's grip on her arm tightened until it hurt. Marcus looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. But all she could see was the king's outstretched hand, steady and patient, waiting for her decision. She started, then stopped. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand. "You don't have to answer now," he said gently. "Think about it, but know that if you choose to let me court you, I'll spend every moment of those 7 days proving that you're not too much of anything. You're exactly enough." The words wrapped around her heart like warm honey, healing wounds she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten they were there. Before she could lose her courage, before Marcus could protest again, before her mother could squeeze her arm into numbness, Lyra stepped forward. 7 days, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But I want to know why. Why me? Why now?" The king's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Because yesterday, I watched you comfort a crying pup with nothing but kindness. I watched you share your lunch with the Omega who forgot hers. I watched you be everything a true mate should be, and I watched a fool throw it away." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "And because my wolf has been restless for 3 years, searching for something I couldn't name, until yesterday, when I caught your scent on the wind and he finally went quiet." The hall erupted in chaos. Pack members shouted questions, Marcus demanded explanations, and Alpha Nightshade tried desperately to restore order. But Lyra heard none of it. All she could hear was her wolf singing in her chest, a joyful howl of recognition that she'd never felt before. Dawn came too early, bringing with it the most terrifying day of Lyra's life. She stood in front of her mirror, trying for the 10th time to braid her hair into something that didn't look like she'd stuck her finger in a lightning storm. Her hands shook so badly she kept dropping the ribbons. "Breathe," she told her reflection. "It's just breakfast with the king. People do that all the time." Her wolf snorted with laughter inside her head, which didn't help her nerves at all. A knock at her door made her jump so hard she nearly fell over. "Lyra?" Her younger brother's voice cracked like he was 12 instead of 16. "There's someone here to see you." She opened the door to find not the king, but a woman she'd never seen before, tall and elegant, with silver hair braided with tiny bells that chimed softly when she moved. Her clothes were simple but beautiful, and her smile was warm as summer sunshine. "You must be Lyra," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent. "I'm Luna Martinez, the king's personal advisor. He sent me to help you prepare for today's activities." "Activities?" Lyra's voice came out as a squeak again. She really needed to work on that. Luna's laugh was like music. "Oh, child, did you think he was just going to sit you down for tea and cookies? This is a courtship trial. There are tests." The word tests hit Lyra like a bucket of ice water. "What kind of tests?" "The kind that show who you really are," Luna said mysteriously. "Don't worry. He's not trying to change you. He's trying to prove to everyone else what he already knows." 2 hours later, Lyra found herself standing in the pack's training ring, surrounded by more people than she'd ever seen in one place. Word had spread beyond their territory. Wolves from neighboring packs had come to watch the spectacle of an alpha king courting a rejected omega. "The first trial," announced Elder Thompson, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, "tests physical capability and partnership." Lyra's stomach dropped to her toes. She glanced around the ring and saw Marcus smirking in the crowd, Elena whispering behind her hand, and dozens of other faces wearing expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright disbelief. But then King Darius appeared beside her, and somehow her fear turned into something else entirely. "Trust me," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "This isn't what you think." The elder cleared his throat. "The trial is a hunt, but not the kind you might expect." A young boy was pushed forward from the crowd, maybe 8 years old, tears streaming down his dirt-stained face. "My little sister," he sobbed. "She wandered into the deep woods yesterday evening. We've been searching all night but can't find her trail." Lyra's heart clenched. She'd helped search for lost children before it was delicate work that required patience and a gentle touch, not speed and strength. "The trial," Elder Thompson continued, "is to bring the child home safely. You have until sunset." Marcus stepped forward, chest puffed out with confidence. "I volunteer to show what a real hunt looks like." But King Darius held up his hand. "This is Lyra's trial. She chooses her own approach." All eyes turned to her again, and for a moment, Lyra felt the familiar urge to shrink into herself. Then she looked at the crying boy and remembered why she was here. She knelt down to the child's eye level. "What's your sister's name?" "Emma," he whispered. "She's only 4. She gets scared of loud noises." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "What's her favorite thing in the whole world?" "Butterflies. She loves butterflies more than anything." Standing up, Lyra turned to face the crowd. Her voice came out clear and strong. "I won't be running through the woods, crashing through bushes, and making noise that might scare a frightened little girl. I'm going to track her carefully, quietly, and when I find her, I'm going to make sure she feels safe." Someone in the crowd laughed mockingly. "That'll take forever." "Then it takes forever," King Darius said firmly. "Sometimes the best way isn't the fastest way." They entered the deep woods together, Lyra, the king, and the boy who refused to be left behind. The forest was thick and dark, full of twisted trees and hidden dangers that made even experienced hunters nervous. But Lyra had spent her childhood in these woods, collecting herbs with her grandmother and learning to read the subtle signs that others missed. "There," she whispered after 20 minutes of careful searching, pointing to a tiny scrap of yellow fabric caught on a low branch. "She came this way." They followed the trail deeper into the woods, moving slowly and quietly. King Darius watched everything she did with intense focus, never questioning her methods or suggesting they move faster. "You're different than I expected," Lyra said softly as they paused to examine tiny footprints in the soft earth. "How so?" "You're letting me lead. Most alphas would have taken charge by now." His smile was gentle. "You know these woods. You understand scared children. Why would I interfere with expertise?" The thought was so foreign to everything she'd been taught about alpha behavior that it took her a moment to process. They found Emma 2 hours later, curled up in a tiny cave beneath the roots of an enormous oak tree. She was filthy, exhausted, and terrified, but completely unharmed. "Emma?" Lyra called softly. "Your brother Tommy sent us to find you." The little girl's head popped up like a frightened rabbit. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" Emma shook her head but didn't move from her hiding spot. Lyra sat down cross-legged in front of the cave, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. "I heard you love butterflies." A tiny nod. "I know where there's a whole meadow full of them, just past the edge of the woods. Would you like to see?" This time, Emma's nod was more enthusiastic. "But first, we need to get you home so Tommy stops crying. He's been so worried about his little sister." It took another hour of patience and gentle coaxing. But eventually, Emma crept out of her hiding place and let Lyra carry her home. The crowd that had gathered to watch was 3 times bigger when they returned. News of the search had spread, and wolves from 5 different packs now lined the training ring. When Emma ran into Tommy's arms, crying, "Lyra found me," the cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 territories away. But Lyra barely noticed the crowd. All her attention was focused on King Darius, whose dark eyes held an expression she'd never seen directed at her before. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You were magnificent," he said simply. Before she could respond, Marcus pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Anyone could have found her eventually. That wasn't a real test of anything. Wasn't it? King Darius's voice went deadly quiet. "Tell me, Marcus, when was the last time you successfully calmed a terrified child? When did you last show the patience to earn trust instead of demanding obedience?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. "I thought so." The king turned back to Lyra, his expression warming again. "One trial down, 6 days to go. Are you ready for whatever comes next?" Looking around at the faces in the crowd, some impressed, some skeptical, but all paying attention in a way they never had before, Lyra felt something new blooming in her chest. "Confidence. Bring it on," she said, and meant every word. The howling wind made Lyra jump as she walked through the dark forest path. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The Alpha King had vanished 3 hours ago, right after receiving a mysterious message during their evening meal. Now strange scents drifted through the trees, making her wolf pace nervously inside her chest. A branch snapped behind her. She spun around, heart hammering. "Your Majesty?" Silence answered back. Then she saw it. A piece of torn royal fabric hanging from a thorn bush. Blood stained the golden threads. Her stomach dropped like a stone, thrown into deep water. Someone had hurt him. Someone had taken the most powerful alpha in all the lands. "Looking for your precious king?" The voice came from above. Lyra tilted her head back. Elena, Marcus's sister, sat perched on a thick tree branch like a deadly bird. Her eyes glowed yellow in the moonlight, and her smile showed too many teeth. "Where is he?" Lyra demanded. Surprised by the strength in her own voice, Elena dropped down, landing silently on bare feet. "Safe. For now. But that depends entirely on you, fat little Omega." The cruel words used to cut deep. Tonight, They bounced off Lyra like pebbles against armor. What do you want? Simple. Leave. Pack your bags, write a goodbye letter, and disappear forever. Elena circled her slowly. Predator stalking prey. Do that, and your king lives to find another bride. And if I refuse? Elena's grin widened. Silver chains don't just burn, sweet Lyra. They poison. Every hour you delay, more silver enters his bloodstream. By dawn, even an alpha king won't survive. Lyra's world tilted sideways. Silver was deadly to all shifters, but especially alphas. Their stronger wolf spirits made them more vulnerable to the cursed metal. You're lying. Am I? Elena pulled out a small device that buzzed with static. Through the speaker came a sound that made Lyra's soul scream. Darius groaning in pain. He's been asking for you. Keep saying your name between the screams. Hot tears spilled down Lyra's cheeks. This was her fault. If she'd never met him, never caught his attention, he'd be safe in his castle. Instead, he was dying because someone wanted her gone. I'll go, she whispered. Just tell me he'll be okay. Elena's triumph tasted bitter in the night air. Smart choice. You have 1 hour to leave the territory. Don't pack much. Where you're going, you won't need fancy dresses. As Elena melted back into the shadows, Lyra stood alone in the forest clearing. Her engagement ring, a simple band Darius had chosen because it reminded him of her eyes, caught starlight like captured hope. She twisted it slowly, thinking, the old Lyra would have run. The Omega who believed herself unworthy would have packed her small bag and vanished to save the man she loved. But that Lyra had died the moment Darius first called her beautiful. This Lyra, the queen he'd helped her become, had different plans. She closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the fear and panic, down to where her wolf lived. For her whole life, she'd been told Omega wolves were weak, good only for healing and nurturing. Nobody had ever mentioned they were also the best trackers. Her wolf's nose twitched. There, beneath Elena's perfume and the forest smells, a trace of silver and pain and the pine scent that meant home. Darius had been here recently. His captors had dragged him north toward the old mining caves. Lyra opened her eyes and smiled grimly. Elena had made one crucial mistake. She'd threatened the person Lyra loved most in the entire world. And hell hath no fury like an Omega protecting her mate. The trek to the caves took 30 minutes of careful tracking. Lyra moved silently through underbrush, following the scent trail like a bloodhound. Her soft body, once considered a weakness, now proved perfect for squeezing between tight spaces and moving without sound. 2 guards stood outside the main cave entrance, but they were watching for large threats. They never noticed the curvy Omega sliding past them through a crack in the rocks. Inside, torchlight flickered against damp stone walls. Lyra heard voices echoing from deeper in the tunnels, Elena's laugh, and Marcus's angry muttering. She crept closer, pressing herself against the cold rock. Should have worked by now, Marcus was saying. She should be halfway to the border. Give her time, Elena replied. Even stubborn Omegas break eventually. And if she doesn't? If she calls our bluff? Then we kill him anyway and blame it on rogue wolves. With the king dead, you'll be next in line to lead this territory. Lyra's blood turned to ice water. They'd never planned to honor their bargain. They were going to murder Darius no matter what she did. Her wolf snarled silently. Not if she had anything to say about it. The silver chains had turned Darius's wrists black with burns, but his eyes blazed gold with fury when Lyra appeared in the cave's shadow. He was chained to the wall like an animal, shirt torn and bloody, but very much alive. Relief flooded through her so strongly, she nearly sobbed. You came, he whispered, voice rough from hours of pain. Did you really think I wouldn't? She knelt beside him, examining the chains. Pure silver, thick as her thumb. Touching them would burn her too, but she had to try. Lyra. No. Get help. Get my guards. There's no time. She pulled off her jacket and wrapped it around her hands. The silver seared through the fabric instantly, making her hiss with pain. But she kept working at the locks. Elena and Marcus are planning to kill you either way. Behind them, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Multiple sets, moving fast. Well. Elena's voice dripped false sweetness. I told you to leave, little Omega. Now you've doomed you both. Lyra spun around, placing herself between the chains and their captors. Marcus stood beside his sister, along with 3 other pack members she'd once considered friends. All of them had shifted partially, claws extended, fangs gleaming, eyes glowing with predator light. 5 against 1, Omega, Darius growled from behind her. How brave of you. Marcus stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Should have taken the deal, Lyra. Now you get to watch your king die slowly before we finish you. Actually, Lyra said calmly, I have a better idea. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver object that made everyone freeze. It was Elena's communication device, the one she'd used to broadcast Darius's pain. But now it was transmitting outward, not inward. I've been broadcasting everything for the last 10 minutes, Lyra announced. Every word, every confession, every threat. Elena's face went white. That's impossible. I destroyed. You destroyed your device. This is mine. Lyra's smile was sharp as winter wind. Amazing what you can buy in the village market when you're desperate. The cave filled with the sound of approaching footsteps. Many footsteps. The royal guards had arrived. Led by Lyra's own father, and the Pack Alpha, they poured into the cave like an avenging army, surrounding the conspirators. Treason, Alpha Nightshade said coldly. Against both our pack and the crown. Marcus lunged toward Lyra with a roar of rage, claws extended, but Darius's chain snapped like thread as his fury triggered a full alpha shift. Even weakened by silver, he was still the king. His massive wolf form crashed into Marcus mid-leap, sending the beta flying into the cave wall. The fight lasted seconds. Royal guards were trained for war, not surprised conspirators in a cave. Within minutes, Elena and her accomplices were chained with their own silver bonds. The locks, Lyra gasped, turning back to Darius. He'd shifted back to human form, but was swaying on his feet. Silver poisoning, making him weak as a newborn pup. Her father produced a set of keys. Elena dropped these when she ran. Good thing you stalled long enough for us to track the signal. As the chains fell away, Darius collapsed into Lyra's arms. She was soft enough to cushion his fall, strong enough to hold his weight, and smart enough to have saved them both. My clever queen, he murmured against her hair. Remind me to never underestimate an Omega with a plan. Elena spat from her corner. You think this changes anything? You're still too fat for a king. Still too weak to rule. Lyra looked down at the woman who'd once made her feel small. You're right about one thing. I am soft. But you know what soft things can do that hard things can't? She helped Darius to his feet, supporting his weight easily. They bend without breaking. They absorb impact without shattering. They nurture instead of destroy. Her voice carried to every corner of the cave. And when someone threatens what they love, they become absolutely unbreakable. As the guards led the prisoners away, Darius pulled Lyra close with trembling hands. You saved my life. We saved each other, she corrected. That's what mates do. Outside the cave, dawn was breaking over the mountains. The silver poisoning would take days to fully leave his system, but he was alive. They were both alive, and Elena's plan had backfired completely. Instead of driving them apart, the danger had proven just how perfectly matched they really were. His strength and her intelligence, his power and her compassion, his protection and her courage. Marcus had been wrong about everything. Lyra wasn't too soft for a king. She was exactly soft enough. The morning sun blazed through the royal tent as Lyra woke to screaming outside. She bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. Fire! Fire in the Omega quarters! The voice belonged to young Tommy, barely 16 and already showing the lean build of a future warrior. His face was streaked with soot and tears. Lyra didn't think. She ran. The wooden building that housed the unmated Omegas was already half-eaten by hungry orange flames. Smoke poured from broken windows, like gray ghosts fleeing the heat. Pack members formed a waterline. But everyone could see the truth written in their scared faces. They were losing the fight. "My sister's in there!" Tommy grabbed Lyra's arm, his claws starting to show. "Emma's trapped on the second floor, but the stairs collapsed." Darius appeared beside them, his royal clothes replaced by simple work gear. "The fire department from the next territory is 20 minutes out. We don't have 20 minutes. I can get her," Lyra said quietly. Both men stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Absolutely not." Darius stepped between her and the burning building. "You're not trained for this." But Lyra was already pulling off her shoes, her mind working fast. "I'm small enough to fit through that broken window on the side. Emma trusts me. She won't panic when she sees me coming." "The floor could cave in any second," Tommy pleaded. But hope was creeping into his voice. "Then we better hurry." Lyra looked straight into Darius's worried eyes. Sometimes being soft isn't a weakness. Sometimes it's exactly what's needed. Before he could stop her, she was moving. The ladder Tommy brought barely reached the window, but Lyra's flexible body squeezed through the gap that would have trapped a bulkier wolf. Inside, the smoke was so thick she couldn't see her own hands. The heat pressed against her skin like an angry beast. "Emma," she called, crawling low where the air was cleaner. "Emma, where are you?" A weak cough answered from somewhere to her left. Lyra followed the sound, her nose guiding her through the maze of overturned furniture and fallen beams. She found Emma huddled behind a desk, too scared to move. "I can't breathe," the younger Omega wheezed, her face pale as winter moon. "I know, sweetie, but we're getting out together." Lyra wrapped her arms around Emma's shaking frame. The girl was tiny, maybe 90 pounds, but carrying dead weight through a burning building was still like trying to move a mountain. The journey back felt like it took forever. Lyra's lungs burned worse than the flames around them. Her soft body, the same curves Marcus had mocked, proved perfect for protecting Emma from falling debris. When a burning beam crashed down, Lyra's padding absorbed the impact that could have broken both their bones. At the window, strong hands waited. Darius himself reached through, his face grim with determination. "Emma first," Lyra gasped, pushing the girl toward safety. "No way," Darius said firmly. "Both of you, now." But the floor was already groaning, ready to give up its fight against the flames. Lyra made a choice that surprised even her. She shoved Emma into Darius's waiting arms, then threw herself backward as the entire room collapsed in a shower of sparks and screaming wood. She landed hard in what used to be the first-floor kitchen, her body cushioned by her own natural softness. Above her, Darius's roar of fear and fury shook the morning air. "I'm okay," she called up, coughing out smoke and dust. "The back door, I can make it." She could, barely. By the time she stumbled into the sunshine, her hair was singed short, and her clothes were more holes than fabric. But Emma was alive, crying happy tears in her brother's arms. The pack gathered around them in a tight circle, their faces showing something Lyra had never seen before: respect. Real respect, not the polite kind people gave to avoid trouble. "You saved her," whispered Mrs. Chen, the pack's oldest Omega. "You risked everything for one of us." But it was Beta Marcus who shocked everyone the most. He pushed through the crowd, his usual sneer, replaced by something that might have been shame. "I was wrong," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I said you were too soft for a warrior's mate, but you just showed more courage than half the fighters in this pack." Lyra looked around at all the faces, some crying, some smiling, all of them seeing her differently than they had that morning. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to make herself smaller. "I'm not trying to be a warrior," she said clearly. "I'm just trying to be myself. And myself cares about people who need help." Darius stepped forward, his clothes still smoky from reaching through the window. "That's exactly why you'll make a perfect queen." "But I'm still soft," she said, testing the words. "Yes," he agreed, pulling her close. "Soft enough to bend instead of breaking. Soft enough to cushion others when they fall. Soft enough to choose compassion over cruelty, even when people have been cruel to you." He turned to address the entire pack, his voice carrying the weight of royal command. "Lyra Nightshade has shown you what real strength looks like. Not the kind that tears down, but the kind that builds up. Not the kind that demands respect, but the kind that earns it through action." The cheers that followed weren't polite. They were genuine, earned with smoke and sweat, and the kind of bravery that comes from a heart that refuses to let others suffer alone. As the fire trucks finally arrived, Lyra realized something had changed inside her chest. The scared, ashamed feeling that had lived there for so long was gone. In its place sat something new, a quiet confidence that didn't need anyone else's approval to exist. She was soft, yes. She was different from the lean, sharp wolves the pack usually celebrated. But she was also brave and kind and willing to risk everything for people who matter. For the first time in her life, that felt like more than enough. That evening, as she sat getting her singed hair trimmed by the pack healer, Emma's mother approached with tears in her eyes. "I don't have much," the older woman said quietly, "but I want you to have this." She pressed a small silver locket into Lyra's palm. "It was my mother's, and her mother's before that. It's always been given to the Omega, who best represents what our kind should be: protective, nurturing, and brave when it matters most." The locket was warm, from being held close to someone's heart. Inside, a tiny inscription read, "Strength comes in many forms." "I can't take this," Lyra protested. "You already earned it," Emma's mother replied. "The fire just made it official." Later, as the pack settled down for the night, Lyra found herself standing again in the garden, where this whole journey had started. But this time, she wasn't hiding. She was simply enjoying the peace after a day that had changed everything. "Regrets?" Darius asked, joining her under the starlight. Lyra touched the locket at her throat, thinking of Emma safe in her bed, of Tommy's grateful tears, of a pack that finally saw her clearly. "Only one," she said. "That it took a fire to show everyone what you already knew." "What's that?" She looked up at him, this powerful king who had chosen her when she couldn't choose herself. "That the best way to prove you're strong enough isn't to become harder, it's to stay soft, in a world that keeps trying to make you sharp." When he kissed her then, she could taste the future on his lips, a future where being different wasn't just acceptable, but valuable. The royal wedding was supposed to happen in 3 days, but Mother Nature had other plans. "The entire northern road is washed out," reported Captain Hayes, shaking rain from his uniform as he entered the Great Hall. "The spring storms hit harder than anyone expected. Half the invited alphas can't make it through the floods." Lyra looked up from the seating charts she'd been wrestling with all morning. Outside, rain hammered against the windows like an army of tiny fists demanding entry. What should have been a perfect spring day for a royal wedding looked more like the end of the world. "We could postpone," suggested her wedding planner, a nervous beta named Claire, who had been jumping at shadows all week. "Wait for better weather, maybe late summer?" No. The word came out stronger than Lyra had intended. Every eye in the room turned to her, including Darius's surprised ones. "I mean, we'll find another way." She stood up from the table covered in fancy papers and crossed to the window. Down in the courtyard, she could see pack members rushing to move supplies to higher ground. The Omega quarters, rebuilt after the fire just 2 months ago, sat on a small hill that was slowly becoming an island. "What are you thinking?" Darius asked quietly, moving to stand beside her. Lyra watched old Mrs. Chen trying to carry a heavy basket through the ankle-deep water, her frail arms shaking with the effort. Without thinking, Lyra was moving toward the door. "Where are you going?" Claire called after her. "We have centerpieces to approve." "The centerpieces can wait," Lyra called back. "People need help." She was out in the rain before anyone could stop her, her wedding planning dress getting soaked in the first 10 steps. The cold water was a shock, but not as much of a shock as seeing her future husband splash up beside her. "You'll catch pneumonia," he said, but he was smiling. "So will Mrs. Chen if we leave her out here." Lyra waded over to the elderly Omega and gently took the basket. "Let me help you with that." "Child, you're supposed to be inside planning your fancy wedding," Mrs. Chen scolded, but her eyes were grateful. "The wedding will happen," Lyra said firmly. "But right now, family comes first." The word surprised her as soon as she said it. Family. That's what this pack had become, especially after the fire. Not the cold, judgment-filled place she'd grown up in, but something warmer and more accepting. By evening, half the pack was crowded into the great hall, driven from their flooded homes by rising water. Families huddled together on makeshift beds, their belongings piled in corners. The fancy wedding decorations looked ridiculous against the backdrop of displaced people trying to stay warm and dry. "This is a disaster," Claire muttered, surveying the chaos. The most important alphas in 3 territories were supposed to witness this wedding, and instead we're running a refugee camp. Lyra looked around at the faces surrounding her, some she'd known her whole life, others who had become dear friends over the past months. Emma was there, fully recovered from the fire, helping serve soup to the elderly. Tommy was organizing the younger wolves into teams to keep everyone's spirits up. Even Marcus was there, quietly helping move furniture without any of his old arrogance. "Claire," Lyra said slowly, an idea forming in her mind, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "What if we're looking at this all wrong? What do you mean?" Lyra turned to face Darius, her heart suddenly racing with excitement. What if this is exactly how our wedding is supposed to happen? Not with fancy alphas we barely know watching from guilt chairs, but with the people who actually matter to us? Darius's eyes began to sparkle with understanding. "You want to get married here? Tonight? In the middle of all this chaos?" "It's not chaos," Lyra said, looking around at the makeshift community that had formed in their great hall. "It's family. And I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather start our marriage than surrounded by the people we actually want to protect and serve." Claire looked like she might faint. "But the flowers, the musicians, the 5-course dinner, the flowers are dying in the rain anyway," Lyra pointed out practically. "Tommy's been playing guitar all evening, and it sounds better than any hired musicians. And Mrs. Chen's soup smells more wonderful than any fancy meal." She took Darius's hands, not caring that they were both still damp from helping people all day. "What do you think? Ready to marry me in front of a room full of wet wolves instead of stuffy dignitaries?" His answer was a kiss that made everyone in the hall start cheering, even though they weren't entirely sure what they were celebrating yet. Word spread fast through the improvised shelter. Within an hour, the great hall had been transformed not by expensive decorators, but by the loving hands of a pack that wanted to give their future leaders a proper send-off. Someone had found wildflowers that hadn't been beaten down by the rain. Others contributed candles that turned the harsh electric lighting into something magical. The younger wolves braided Lyra's hair with small white blossoms that Emma had carefully preserved from her own hope chest. "You sure about this?" asked her father, appearing at her elbow as she stood at the back of the room. He'd been quiet most of the day, probably mourning the expensive spectacle he'd been planning. Lyra looked out over the assembled crowd. Instead of stiff formal wear, people wore their everyday clothes, many still damp from the storm. Instead of rigid ceremony seating, families clustered together, however, felt comfortable. Instead of hired entertainment, Tommy was indeed playing guitar, while his sister sang harmony. It was perfect. "I've never been more sure of anything," she told her father honestly. The ceremony itself was unlike anything that had ever happened in the Great Hall before. Elder Morris, the pack's spiritual leader, spoke about love that grows stronger in storms instead of weaker. Darius's vows talked about wanting a queen who would roll up her sleeves and work beside him, not above their people. Lyra's vows promised to never let formality become more important than compassion. When they were pronounced mates for life, the cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 territories over. But the best moment came during the impromptu reception, when Emma's little cousin, a tiny Omega pup of maybe 7, tugged on Lyra's wedding dress. "Queen Lyra?" the child whispered. "My mama says you're gonna make things better for Omegas like us. Is that true?" Lyra knelt down to the pup's eye level, not caring that her wedding dress was getting muddy from the wet floor. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Rosie." "Well, Rosie, I'm going to try my very best to make sure every Omega in this kingdom knows they're valuable exactly as they are. That includes you, even if I'm not good at fighting." "Especially then," Lyra said firmly. "The world needs wolves who are good at caring and healing and making others feel safe. That's just as important as being good at fighting." Rosie's face lit up like Christmas morning. She threw her small arms around Lyra's neck and whispered, "I'm gonna be just like you when I grow up." Later, as the evening wound down and pack members settled in for the night in their temporary shelter, Lyra found herself back at that same window where so much had changed. But now she wore a simple gold band on her finger and a crown of flowers in her hair. And the frightened Omega, who had once hidden in gardens, felt like a stranger from someone else's life. "Any regrets about the fancy wedding?" Darius asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Lyra leaned back against her husband's chest, watching their pack family finding comfort together in the storm's aftermath. Tomorrow they would start rebuilding what the floods had damaged. Next week, they would begin the real work of ruling together. But tonight, surrounded by the people they loved most, felt like the perfect beginning to everything that mattered. "The only thing I regret," she said softly, "is that it took me so long to realize that the most beautiful ceremonies aren't the ones that look perfect from the outside. They're the ones that feel perfect from the inside." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to calm, and the first stars were peeking through the breaking clouds. Inside, a new queen had been crowned not with jewels and gold, but with the love and respect of a pack that had learned to see strength in softness, beauty in kindness, and royalty in service to others. And in the morning, when the sun rose on their first day as married rulers, it would shine on a kingdom where being different was finally, truly enough.